Hey, nice to see you all. Erin Zen Warrior here. So I wanted to comment on a couple of things. I hope you guys enjoyed my recent yoga video. There will be another one this week, so I'm trying to do one of those a week on just very simple, accessible yoga stuff that you can do when you get home to unbox your desk. Today, I have been meaning to do this video for a couple of weeks, and in the last few weeks, I've actually been doing a rebuild of my system post-COVID. Now, I had COVID back, I think it was the end of March. It was March sometime. Might have been the start of March. And what I noticed over the course of 3 months when I went back and looked was that actually the measuring devices I use, so mainly the Aura Ring device was what was of interest to me. But also I noticed on my watch as well, which also does an HRV reading, but in a slightly different way, that I'd never hit 100% since I'd had COVID. I think I did maybe a couple of days after I kind of got over it, I hit 100, and then I didn't hit it again for the next 3 months. And for me, that would be very unusual. I also noticed that I just wasn't quite hitting the HRV stats that I had been hitting on my Aura Ring, which is the one that I wear at night. And then finally I got into the slump where I was just like, I cannot pick myself back up. And it was quite frustrating. In my job, like I interact with people, I'm touching people by way of like manipulating their bodies. I do therapy kind of modality around a contractile field model, see Philip Beach, to understand what I mean by that. And it's sort of based off acupuncture and stuff like that. So I'm very much in people's space as respectfully as I can be. And it can take a lot. And just, I remember waking up and just being like, the thought of going through a day and doing 8 hours of actual contact time with people was just fully daunting. And I canceled the whole day. I just went, no, I can't do it. And I looked at it and I went, you know what? I'm actually going to cancel the whole week if I still feel like this next week. And my system was just very, very down. My HRV had bottomed out for about a week at that point. And I took a week off and my HRV stayed low for a few more days. And I started detoxing. Like I took the week off to actually start detoxing. And as I started to realize what was going on with my system, so this very depleted HRV, I should explain that. HRV refers to heart rate variability. It is an average of the distance between beats, understanding that your diastolic and your systolic happen in different timings, so that as your heart kind of goes gadunk, it's got a different distance between the gadunk to the start of the next g, if you like. You like the sound effects? Gadunk, gadunk, gadunk. Anyway, back to what I was saying. So it's like an average, and what you want is a good high average. And it's all very personal and stuff like that, though I do notice that with my chronic disease clients, heart rate variability is considerably lower than someone of the same age of potentially similar fitness. We see a big gap. I also notice a big gap between very fit, tall men and fit, smaller women. Tall men seem to have a much higher heart rate variability. And I would say that's because heart rate variability is like a relatively quick and dirty way to get an indication of your hormonal health and the state of stress in your body. So women being hormonally more complicated than men. If I was a man, I'd get in trouble for saying it. But we are, by the nature of being able to reproduce by actually giving birth and carrying a human in us, this system is more complex. It's actually a bit like a weather map. And for those men out there, you try living in it. So my HRV being very low was a bad sign energetically, and it did show me what was cool about that, and has been cool about those devices, is that it showed me what that there was more going on than I was just failing to cope. And so I took this week off. I contacted a homeopathic naturopath acupuncturist friend of mine who's an ex-surgeon. And I said to him, look, this is going on. What do you think? And he said something he confirmed something that I'd also noticed a little bit, but he confirmed it outright. He said that with COVID and the vaccine, that, and I guess because they have similar parts in them, that you can see it pushing out stuff in your system that is kind of residually in there from a long time ago. So for me, this fatigue problem was a big problem. And as a result of having the virus, I had started to have this thing pushed out of my system again. So this fatigue that I've been managing into a really good state over the years is still residing there to some extent. And now I have this opportunity, which I see as a very positive thing, to have it, to work with it and remove it from my system. So I asked him for a prescription. Now, I was never one for homeopathics. My stepmother was very into them. I never, as a child, found them very helpful, and have never found them very helpful as an adult either, until I met this fabulous man, Dr. Joe. And at that point, for those of you in New Zealand, for those of you anywhere in the world, Dr. Joe is in Palmerston North, Nutramedica. Yeah, I think that's how you say it. And the way he works with homeopathics, I've been shocked. I've been truly shocked to see what it has pushed out of my system, to stimulate my system to build up its own natural response and work holistically to clear my body of different problems. So he forwarded me a homeopathic to work with. It was interesting. What he actually said was that within his own body, being a martial artist, after having COVID, he found that all the symptoms of his injuries flared up and made it so that even on one day, he could barely walk. But he'd also noticed it in other clients. I personally have noticed in some of my clients, a return to bad eating patterns was quite interesting. So where we'd done a lot of work, there's been like an emotional overlay that has re-risen in them and driven them more into their like sympathetic eating, that sort of comfort eating zone. I've seen some like shoulder injuries and finger numbness come back up in people that they haven't had for years and years. I've seen other stuff that's a bit worse as well, like clotting factors, various other bits and pieces that have come up. There's definitely been a resurgence of symptoms for some reason in this time that we're in, and of old symptoms, of things that we can still do work on as individuals. And so we should see it very positively, that we have this call to work on something that is still within us. So I took his homeopathic. I started a detox where I ate fruits and vegetables and took a lot of herbal supplements to help clear my system, like black walnut, wormwood, various different green supplements and sea greens, chlorella, chlorophyll, and it was a lot. And then I also saw a colonic irrigationist as well. There's a great woman here in Wellington. And when I spoke to her, it was super interesting to hear her observations. Her observations were that there's a SCOBY type layer that seems to layer the lungs, and that this is residually left behind. And our lungs, in a holistic sense, represent grief. So that's always an interesting stimulation to see that inhibition come onto the lungs. It's going to draw back up your grief. And I feel this is why we see this recurrence of symptoms as well. But also that the SCOBY layer, to me, I view it as a constipation, like this thickening that's limiting us from taking a full breath. along with stress, being stimulated into fight or flight, all that sort of stuff. Then also with the nature of virus, flu, colds and flu, all of those things, there is always a level of constipation in the body that goes with those. Now, as I did a post on my Instagram recently at Erin_Zen for those of you who want to follow. Oh, and while we're here, don't forget to like and subscribe this if you're still listening. So I commented that constipation is not, I cannot go to the toilet. Even if medical professions define constipation as that, to me, if you're not clearing your system on a regular basis, you are impacted and essentially holding on to shit. And who wants to hold on to their own shit, right? And so if you take that on the metaphorical level of clearing your mind, of letting go of anger, of spiritually being in this moment, you want to be clearing out. Now, I'm not promoting a truck ton of laxatives on a daily basis because that's not healthy either. And I'm definitely not promoting going to see a colonic irrigationist too regularly because it's invasive. I think there are huge benefits and they do amazing work, but I do find that there's a tendency for them to encourage this invasion, or quite literally, invasion, instead of to encourage a clearing of the body by fasting, by fruit fasts, juice fasts, water fasts. Water fasts we must be careful with and should be guided on if we're doing anything more than a day. 24-hour, 16 and 8s, in the right time and space, allow the body to do something that to basically clear where, we're very good at consuming. We're very efficient at it. Our bodies are not as efficient as clearing out. And so we need to give them a break. And sometimes using certain herbal supplements to help kill off candida, kill off SIBO, parasitic infection. A lot of us are carrying parasites in our system and they are aiding to clog us up as well. Most of us have candida overgrowth, which naturally resides in our system. And certainly if you're not moving, which most of us didn't during COVID, because we were exhausted, so we're moving very little. If you're not moving, if you're not stretching, if you're not cathartically, energetically doing some breath work, if you're not breathing properly, which of course we've got the SCOBY on the lungs, you are going to find that you might have residual effects from COVID. I think it would be an interesting question for us to consider is what is long COVID? And is long COVID people being hit harder with this after effect I found that finally caught up with me properly to the point where I had to stop 3 months later? I think it's an interesting question. I don't have an answer because I haven't done the research on it, but I do think that there's a suggestion here that maybe there's an answer to getting over long COVID with good detox. Maybe. I certainly, if I had long COVID, that is what I would be doing because it would be worth a try. If it doesn't work, what did I lose? So 3 days into my detox, I went to see a colonic irrigationist. What I find with colonic irrigation is that it is heavy on the system. And so it's day one is quite exhausting. Or the day you have it is like chill out, be nice to yourself, eat soft relining foods like overripe organic bananas and organic avocados and lots of fluids. What was interesting this time around is that actually I didn't notice it exhaust me like it has on occasion in the past. I instantly noticed a lift. And by the next morning after a good sleep, I felt great. I felt human again. I noticed at this stage only a small climb in my HRV. And at this point, I started looking to make sure that my supplementation was also supporting my recovery, because also I find that the colonic is, of course, very stripping. So something we don't do well in our society is talk about rebuilding. We talk about detoxing all the time. But as part of our detoxing, we must also look at rebuild. And so I looked into rebuilding. And I started with my B12. I decided to take a drop form of B12, and I set aside my methyl guard that I had been using because I just felt I really wanted that. I really wanted that B12 supplement from the drops. My methyl guard is B12, B6, B9, B2, I think. So it's a combination of, but it's not in drop form. And I really just wanted that liquid, quick absorption. And then I also added in mass doses of vitamin C. And here was the kicker. Here was the game changer. Mass doses of vitamin D. Now, if you've done your alternative research, you will see that there is research backing the use of vitamin D to limit uptake of spike proteins. So I'm going to reverse engineer this a little bit and just play theory. So total theory coming up. If vitamin D, when you're being flooded with spike proteins, interacts to block the uptake of spike proteins, but also your system is down and attempting to recover and attempting to fight, do we then assume that actually you're going to maybe be smashing your vitamin D as well? So as in your vitamin D is going to be challenged and therefore you're going to need more. And so what I started doing was taking 10,000 IU every other day, which is a big dose. They recommend, I think, no more than 4,000 IU a day. So I took 10,000 IU every other day for a couple of weeks. And I only recently just stopped that. And between those three things, particularly the vitamin D, I started going from an HRV of 24, 25 by that point. It was down at 20. I think I'd gotten up to 28 with the colonic, and then I added in these things. And when I added in the vitamin D, it was maybe a day after I added in the B and the C. As soon as I added in that vitamin D, I hit 50, 52, and 56 in HRV, which are actually two of my highest HRV readings ever. And it then made me reflect on whether I've ever been getting enough vitamin D. I also started taking MSM because MSM supports the processing of vitamin D through the liver. And we have a tendency to be low in MSM because we eat greens that are glyphosate loaded. And as much as I buy organic greens, I still eat out. So I still take in a fair amount of glyphosates, I would assume. And this was really successful. And I started feeling like $1 million, to be honest. There is one other part to what I did. I signed up to Joe Dispenza's online progressive and intensive bundle. Thank you, Joe. And I went into another phase of learning and building my meditation. And because I was energetically low, I also saw this as a failure in some way or part to be connected. And that doesn't mean I wasn't connected. I think that's a bit of a harsh judgment on my part. I would say that I clearly could have done better, because I do believe that we can alchemize our systems above and beyond all of this stuff that I've just talked about. I see very much as food, body movement, body manipulation as a way to elevate the body so that we can elevate the mind. So it's like a portal through which we can transcend into our meditation. So for me, it was an important part of the cleansing process that I was also cleansing my mind and cleansing thoughts that were blocking me and making me miserable. Because of course, when my energy got very low and I was struggling to cope, all of my negative self-talk was coming up. So super important. I was very proactive and very, very aware that I needed to work with my mind. So like, subscribe, ask me questions. I think I've covered it. The way I went about my detox, I wouldn't say is the only way, but this is how I bombed it really quick. For those of you struggling with long COVID, and I don't know whether you'd be able to be treated, but I would definitely look into colonic. and see if you feel that that's for you. I think if I had long COVID, like I said, I would look for every way out. I would even look into a guided water fast with a real pro. I do think there are people out there doing water fasts and juice fasts who are not sensitive enough to be a good guide. And so I would be very wary of vetting that person first and feeling safe and energetically safe with that person. Um, yeah, that's all I'll say. Anyway, Erin and Moria signing out. Please send me messages with regards to anything you want to talk about. I've got another topic coming up this week that's really important for women's health and safety, and anyone's health and safety, really. And a bit of an awareness one, and it's quite horrifying. But yes, I will be talking about that later in the week, so make sure you tune into that. Ciao.